Welcome everyone to the IXUS 2025.4 release highlights. My name is Yusuf and today we'll be talking through some of the new features. Okay, so the key features and improvements in this latest release are mainly around efficiency and workflow. For both the manager and modeler, we have version 4.17. The main highlights are a new bulk antenna editor for editing multiple antennas at once, Signage status options with configurable styling, and calculation speed improvements for environmental slices and field points. And we've also updated the FAC Validation Report, which is uploaded. Okay, so let's dive into each of these features, starting with the bulk antenna editor. So this is a big feature. So previously, if you needed to modify multiple antennas, you had to edit each one individually. Sometimes that was time consuming on large sites. Now you can access the bulk antenna editor from the antennas toolbar or by right-clicking a selection of antennas. I will demonstrate this later. And then the editor has two tabs. So here we see the properties, which has the physical attributes like azimuth, mechanical tilt, and height. And then we also have the details for the electrical properties like frequency bands, electrical tilts, power settings, etc. You can also add new antennas from this dialog box or delete existing ones. The same goes for the frequency bands. So this should be a significant time saver, especially when setting up new sites or making bulk config changes on sites. Next up, we have the Signage status. So this is a new feature that helps with compliance reporting and site planning. So every signage element now has a status field that can be set to either existing, proposed, or removed. So the real power comes from how it can be configured from the styling options under the preferences we see here in the dialog box. So you can set different visual styles for each status. For example, a black border for existing signs, as you can see, and then a blue dashed border for proposed signs, which is shown here on the right side, and then a red border which with a cross for signs that need to be removed. So yeah, this is just a sample, but then in the demo, I will also show you how to change these. So this makes it immediately clear in reports and pictures and also avoids uploading of duplicate signs to serve the same purpose. And yeah, once in the demo, I'll also show you that the styling options are fully customizable. And then in terms of color and design. And then some minor features and enhancements. First, we have the default placement for the area annotation labels. Previously, it was on origin, and now it appears above the center of gravity of the surface. Second, we've implemented calculation speed improvements through a caching mechanism. So during simulations, the entire antenna list is now cached, which reduces reduces the calculation times and removes the unnecessary redundant processing. And then finally, we also have an update on the FAC Validation Report, and that has been uploaded on the knowledge base for those of you who are interested in going through that. Finally, this release also has a few bug fixes that improve stability and user experience. So some of the key fixes include that selecting labels no longer covers the label's geometry component to be selected. It's only the outline, and then signage with transparent backgrounds no longer appears to be black in the modeler. And when creating 3D tools, sometimes there were extra objects in the field of view, so that's been removed as well. And then the modeler now recognizes offline file saves correctly, so that refers to the .xs files when working on an offline file. And then deleting pre-existing markers also no longer causes a crash, and then this is also comprehensively documented in the release notes. Okay, now we're ready to go into the demo. So just an overview of what we'll be talking about. So firstly, the big feature will be the bulk antenna editor. I'll walk you through that. I'll show you how to access it, the properties, the details. Then we'll go into the sited statuses, and then finally just on the label placement of the area annotation. Okay, I'm going to reshare my screen with the modeler now. Okay, so yes, this is just an example site. I'm just going to pan out and show you from different angles what the roof or the building in this case looks like. There's a small upper section here with different antennas. So starting with the bulk antenna editor, you'll see in the toolbar of the antennas, there is this icon that looks like a settings gear next to the antenna. And if we click that, we'll see this dialog appears. So this is a list of the entire antennas that are on this model. So in this case, there's not that many, but if there were many, then we would be able to scroll down and see more. And there's two tabs. On the top, we have properties. So this is similar to the physical properties of the antenna. If I go out, basically all the things that we can modify at this level. And sorry, I'm just going. And then the second tab is the details, which shows the electrical properties of the same antenna. So if we toggle between the two tabs, we'll see the first two columns are intentionally kept in the same layout so that it's easy on the eye to know what physical versus what electrical properties belong to a said antenna. And then we have a plus icon here, which is referring to adding an antenna. So if I click that, we'll see it opens an extra dialog or an extra row at the bottom, which allows me to type new antennas. I will go into this in a bit more detail, but I just want to show you what the existing editable fields are. And then within the details, we'll see there is an option to remove the frequency bands, whereas also to add a frequency band for said antenna. So each antenna would have this on the first row, and then the second row represents the frequency band itself. And if I want to add more frequency bands to the same antenna, I can just press that and then edit based on what is supported by that antenna. So the previously implemented feature where we can edit the frequency band owner still applies in this case. So if corrections need to be made, we don't need to delete the frequency band. We can click on it, select the new frequency band, and then frequency band owner if needed, and then update the port power. And finally, if someone has configured their model to display total power, which was also a new feature for the last release, the dialog box accepts that. If we see into the details, we'll see instead of port power, we are now seeing total port or power, or the total power of the frequency band in one column, but for the entire list of antennas. Okay. If we don't want to see all of the antennas at the same time, maybe I'm interested in only the 5G antennas for this site, I will select by pressing Control and clicking each one, and then I can press the same icon, or I can right click and say bulk edit. So let's go with the right click option in this case. Here we see instead of the entire list, only my selection of antennas is appearing in both tabs. So in the properties, we see the antenna owner itself, the height, whether the height value is locked or not, the mechanical tilt, the azimuth, and whether the antenna is enabled or disabled. We also have the option to delete the entire antenna. Going into the next tab, which is the details, we will see the frequency bands for each of these antennas based on what is selected. We can add more frequency bands to one antenna at a time, or we can add new antennas entirely. So let's go with adding a new antenna. I will keep it the same as what is above. So if you noticed, I was on the details tab, but when I started adding the new antenna, it brought me back to the properties tab, because we first need to define the antenna name, its position, and then we can go on to the other details, which is here. So I can go by adding a frequency band on the newly created antenna. I will make the previous sectors. say okay. So by default, this antenna is going to be placed and then I can manually maneuver it wherever I need. So the height is locked. It's at that height, which is representative of all the different sectors. And this is my newly created antenna. So if I don't have anything selected and I click on the dialog again, I will see that antenna appear at the bottom with the properties that I've just had. And obviously, if I have different set of antenna owners, I can select the entire list of owners to just select or look at visually a certain set of antennas. I can look at the entire list. I can add new antennas and new frequency bands from this. And the same goes for removal. So instead of going into each antenna, editing the values here, the bulk antenna editor allows me to do that in one window.
Okay, so what I'll just demonstrate is the signage. So if I create a new sign, let's just select a caution sign in this case. I'm going to set center, I'm going to place it over here on the door, as you would normally do. So by default, it is set to existing. So this is effectively an old sign that has been added to the model. Will also just have the existing status. But if we now go to edit preferences, appearance, you'll see there's now a new field here that's called signage options. For the styling, we have a border with a strike through, a border with a cross, strike through only, and a cross only. And we can also select a pattern. So if you don't want any border added, you could just select none, or you can change it to like a solid line and dashed line and stuff like that. You can also edit the line color as well as the line weight, and that will then determine how this is styled. So at the moment, it's set to obviously for the existing to not have any pattern at all, so it's not going to have a border, as you can see over here. And then for the proposed, we have a dashed border in blue, and for the to be removed, we have a border like a red solid line with a cross through. So if I now take this same sign, actually let's create a few of them. There's two of them. And let's place this one over here. That doesn't make sense. And this one maybe here on this pole that might make sense. On this barrier. So we can now take this sign over here and change it to be removed. So essentially that will now in our reporting quite clearly show, listen, this is a sign that we don't want to be here. It is there at the moment, but we want it to be removed. So now it will appear to have a red cross through. And let's take this one over here, and we can change one to proposed, essentially saying that this does not exist yet, but it needs to be placed there because it's we want a sign over there. Let's just change this one to a notice. And this one, for example, is a existing sign. We should also be able to change the preferences now to, let's say I don't want a border with a cross, but I want a border with a strike through. So that will then update this sign as well to have that styling. But obviously, you typically want to set up a let's call it rules in your organization of how you want to display your signage, so that you can essentially bake this into your report templates as well. Which means that in your report template, you can have like a legend saying, this is what styling we are using for a proposed sign. For example, we're using a blue dashed line border for any sign that is proposed, and a red strike through for any sign that needs to be removed. But luckily that's quite clear. Okay. Yeah, that's effectively it. So this is local to your modeler, so it's not a manager setting that gets synced through at this stage. We might obviously change that in the future, but as a first implementation, it's a modeler only local to the specific user. How this is set up. You can also change the line weight. I think the 10 should be fine for most users, or for most signs actually. There might be, if you have a sign that is essentially not specified in the correct aspect ratio as what the picture is. For example, if you stretch the sign, it might not look perfect, but effectively if you upload a picture and you use the same aspect ratio as what the picture is, when you define your sign sizing, it should display correct. One thing that I think was maybe a bit unclear with the signage, which I noted, was so essentially the preferences, like the styling choices that you make for your preferences, that is local to the specific modeler or the specific user that is using it. However, the statuses that you assign to the signage, that is, however, saved back to the manager. And once you check out the site again, or you want to edit that model again, those statuses will pull through to the other user as well. But it will then use the same styling choices that the new user is using.
Thank you for that, Martin.
Nice. Okay. That's it, what I wanted to demonstrate here. I'm not sure. I think the next option is probably looking at the calculation. I can probably do that as well. But to do that, I need to add some more field points. Add a few field points over there, duplicate and move. Okay, field points. And you also have an environmental slice. Probably have reduced the number of antennas as well, but actually that's the point. So previously, when you would calculate this base station, obviously in this stage we have the exclusion zones refining. Once it moves over to the environmental slice and the field points, you would have a process antenna list step. That is now going to be much quicker, because we are actually, so as you notice, you probably didn't even see that step, because the step is no longer happening, because the antenna list is already processed for the exclusion zones. So by caching that information, we can essentially avoid that step while calculating the field points. So field points and environmental slices should be, especially if you have, especially if you have lots of custom antennas, like as shown over here, the ones that look like that. So if you have lots of custom antennas, the process antenna list can take quite a while. But that should now no longer happen for environmental slice and field points. So you should see a dramatic speed improvement while doing that. Okay, so area annotation. So as you can see, essentially the label that is associated with this area annotation, not the attachment point, the label itself, is now configured to be above the center of gravity of the surface that you define. As you can see over here, the placeholder is moving along with me. So previously it would have been set to the ground origin point, which was a bit jarring, especially if you were placing your area points on the ground surface. But now, if I would specify a area over here, I'm just going to do it like this. You see that placeholder is moving along with my surface. So if I don't place the text label and I just select OK now, it should be just above the surface. Obviously, you can still place the text label as you would have in the past. But if you forget, which is can happen quite easily because there's no natural way of moving from these corners to the next thing, which is the place label. For example, if we're doing a simple text label, your first thing that you are specifying is the attachment point. So if we click here, it automatically moves over to the text label. So it feels quite natural to place that in a position where we want it. However, with the area annotation, because we're specifying lots of corners, there's no way for the program to know if you are finished with specifying these corners, so it cannot automatically move over to the place text label. So it is something that can very often be missed by the user, which will result, or previously resulted in the text label being at the origin, which was a bit frustrating. So now it will just place it right above it. Okay.
There is one question. I'm just going to address that before I share. So yes, that was an issue and is part of the release notes as well. It was a bug where offline or .xs files would not be recognized as successfully saved. But with the latest release, that has been patched. So now you can exit by saying yes. But yes, on the previous one, which is 4.16, the yes would still keep you in the loop of not being able to proceed. And the only way to exit that was no, but that has been patched in this release. The same goes for the markers, where if pre-existing markers were deleted and there were a lot of pictures, then sometimes the modeler would crash, and that has also been patched. So thank you for that question. Okay, there is another question regarding, thank you for the demonstration. Would it be feasible to copy existing antennas instead of editing from scratch when adding new antennas in the bulk editor? I think that would be a good enhancement. So thank you for that. It's not possible at the moment, but we do need ideas like this from the users so that we can direct our development towards that.
Yeah. Thanks, Paco. I can maybe actually mention. So we're already planning for 26.1. We are already planning additional enhancements to the bulk editor, copying antennas is actually one of the features that we're already planning as an enhancement to this. But as Yusuf mentioned, we always try to get feedback from our users as well, especially with new features. If we try to implement let's call it the Rolls Royce of the feature, then later find out that this is not actually what the users require, which is obviously a big waste. So sometimes it's very good to implement the bare functionality. Well, not the bare functionality, but get feedback before trying to implement everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. Yeah, just one more thing before we head on to the release notes and the FAC report. So one of the other bugs that was fixed in this release is on selecting signs. So previously, if a sign was selected, the entire selection would appear blue, similar to geometry. But the correct representation should be just the outline, and now that has been also fixed with this release. Okay, going over to the knowledge base. So this is for each release, we create a comprehensive release notes. So that is attached here, and also the FAC test reports is attached here. We will also upload this webinar's recording here for future reference. So this should be accessible to all. And then another section is feature requests. So based on your usage and based on existing features or updates to existing features, please to log your ideas here. Like Martin said, that is very valuable, and then it can help us identify what will impact the users most. So yeah, that is it from a demonstration point of view. Thank you, Martin, for helping me out. If there is more questions while we're still on the demo, I'll be happy to look at that. And yeah, we can just give it a few minutes for maybe any more questions that are coming through. Okay. Right. So yeah, some of the clients have already upgraded. Thank you for the prompt responses. And if you haven't yet, then please do reach out by either responding on the email or reaching out to us through our help desk or any other support channels. And yeah, please log your features. That is very, very valuable to us. And yes, thank you for attending the webinar. And if there is any questions, please, Martin, can you let me know? Otherwise, I think this is it.
Don't think there's any more questions.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending.